before getting ready for your speech. I just truly believe the first impression before you speak is everything.
Oh.
Oh, wait, I didn't have a problem with that.
Do you recommend that we dress professional regardless of what it is that we are applying for?
I'm so glad you asked that question.
That is a good question.
People ask that almost every time, and I will answer it. Well, for one thing, we're in a college in which some people have to come from places where they cannot change their clothes easily. So I'm not going to grade you down if you have to come in, if you're a welding student and you're wearing your welding gear, that sort of thing, or you're a medical assistant student and you're wearing the uniform. However, I would say that most people feel more confident when they feel they're dressed for the role. So to that degree, I would say it's probably not a bad idea for you to dress the way you really would want to.
Yeah, like, I mean, so like, for instance, you know, somebody's applying to be, you know, athletic physical trainer or some type of sports field, you know, come in sweats, you know, come like you know how to do the job, you know. I mean, it might be okay to come in, but you're not going to dress like that on the job. You know? You're not going to be in slacks working up somebody's legs, rubbing out their muscles. You know? You're going to be in shoes and some sweats.
Well, everything in public speaking depends on your audience and your purpose. So if your audience is good, if you think your audience is going to respond well to a particular kind of dress, then I would go ahead and use it. Yes, Steve?
Do I have time to share something?
Sure.
I was here in 1978 going to machine trade. I had 100 hours in the course. Boeing came down and interviewed people that had 1,500 hours in the course. I told the instructor, give me an application, I'm going to fill it out, I'm going to go in and talk to them. I went in and I sat down in front of 3 supervisors, and the first thing I said was, I know I only have 100 hours in the course. You want somebody with 1,500 hours, but here's what I did in the military. I said, I will come sweep your floors, scrub your toilets, and stay in machine trade until I'm qualified to get on the machine. I knew what their expectations were, and the supervisor that hired me told me that it was my motivation was the #1 reason he hired me.
Right.
He knew I would stay in the
You don't let the clothes wear the man, you wear the clothes. Oh yeah.
That's right.
Let's
Yeah,
talk.
something else to focus on besides what you were wearing.
Let's talk about something else that's related, sort of related to this, which is preconceptions and stereotypes. You know that the employer is prohibited by law from asking certain questions about you. Like they can't ask your marital status, your religion, your sexual orientation, your ethnicity. What else am I leaving out? There's several things they may not ask by law. That doesn't mean they're not curious about those things. So Janie, when you were talking about watch out for your social networking stuff, watch out for everything, because if it's the higher you go in the hierarchy, the more assiduous and careful the employer ought to be about checking to see if you're really going to fit.
Right.
Go ahead, Tim.
Does that mean that you can call them on that if they ask you that, or should you just answer the questions? Or
Ooh, good
if you don't feel
question.
comfortable
That is a
with
good
it?
question.
There are several ways to respond if they ask you a prohibited question. I think it depends. You have to make a judgment at that time whether you feel you belong at that place. Because after all, there are hundreds of thousands of employers, aren't there? Now, often the first interview you have in a large organization will be with some lackeys or with some low-level people who aren't going to be actually doing the hiring, and they aren't going to be supervising you. So they might make just a real gaffe, a big mistake, which you might be willing to overlook because you think you're going to make such a good impression you'll go on to people who know better what they're doing. So if that happens, you could just answer the question. On the other hand, there are other ways to answer it. One way is to say, you know and I know that that's not a legal question. However, I have no objection to answering it because I'm proud of my answer, and then answer it. Or you could say, I'd be happy to answer that question if you could explain to me how it relates to my ability to do the job.
Right. What bearing it has.
Or you can just refuse to answer it and say, "That's not, I'm sorry, I'd like another question because that one, as you know, is not legal." So that's something to be prepared for in advance. A good employer, a thoughtful employer, is not going to ask you those questions. And by the same token, you as the employee, as the candidate, are probably not going to bring up those things
Right.
unless it's really an exceptional circumstance in which you're sure that it's going to help you. So if you're applying for a position, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
So, kind of along those same lines, say you do go for an interview and the first question they ask you is, tell me about yourself. Is it appropriate to say, like, I've been married for 10 years, I have 2 kids, blah, 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 because, you know, like, marital status, I mean, that's not, is it appropriate to add something like that, or should you
You
not
need to
ever
you need to
talk
answer
about
that way.
How
Is
do
it
you wanna
appropriate?
answer that question is what
Yeah.
you're saying, what is the best way to answer that question
Yes.
without getting
Yeah.
too personal?
Yes.
Yeah. What do the rest of you think?
Well, I think it depends on the position you're applying for and how big the organization is or the company, because if it's a big company where you're going to be dealing with a large work family, then I kind of think you want to tell them about your family life and how much of a family person you are, and so they can get an idea like, okay, this is a good family person, they work with
Yeah,
other
how well
people.
you fit in
know,
with that company.
So
Right.
they can get an idea that, okay, this
Mold your
person is good
question
with
to the-
family, so
To the
they're not
position.
Mhm.
like, well, this person's closed off, they don't accept other people, so I mean, I think it depends.
Marley, what's your perspective on it?
I believe that always being honest and being true to who you are is always the best way to go. It doesn't mean you have to give every detail. So if you, they say, tell me about yourself, and the most important thing is that you're a mother. And right now, that's what I see from you. Is the most important thing is that I'm a mother, and I absolutely adore my little girl. She's my world. Going then after that, you can then say I've been a student, and things that are really impassionate, important to you, that are the positive, good things that people want to see. And you know, when I'm married, and I'm very proud of being married, I don't have to give them a number of how many years. Yes, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a sister.
I'm going to
and a
disagree with
daughter.
you on this. We can all have our own perspective.
Yeah.
I
Go
would
ahead.
give them the years.
Let me tell you why I
Unless you
disagree.
have-
I disagree because one of the things you said was you want to show them what is most important to you and what you're most passionate about. I don't think that's what they're after.
You
Even
wanna
though
know
that's
you're dedicated.
even though that's what the question sounds like, what they're really asking you is every question is a variation of why should we hire you instead of somebody else. It doesn't mean you have to hide it, but there are other things that will make a stronger impression on the
I was
employee.
referring to her just saying what she was saying about being married and all of those
Yep.
things.
I just
I'm referring to
wanted
that
know
too.
if that was
Right.
like appropriate to talk. I mean,
So what do you
Well,
mean, and how better would you word that if
I
someone
would leave
says,
that out. I would not refer to my marital status at all.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then what is the first things that you would talk about? Just exactly why you're there and why you feel that you're the best person for the job, period.
That's
To
right.
ask
Well,
her-
I've interviewed and hired quite a few people, and most of the time, if I'm in an interview and I say that to someone, or I say, well, what experience you have, or tell me about yourself, or whatever, if they immediately start, I want them to tell me their opinion of themselves, not their family, not their political views. I want them to see how they perceive themselves, how they feel about themselves. Not they've been married, and their kids and things like that. I want Sarah to say, well, I'm 26 years old and I've been in school for 4 years, and I love this or I love that. Things that are important to her that make her who she is, not necessarily her family, but her experience, how she feels about herself.
I wouldn't mention your age either.
Well, I have done that, but I'm saying.
Tim, go ahead.
I think when it comes down to it, because I've done ACAP when I got out of the Army,
Mhm.
and some of the tips that they gave us was, when they ask you about yourself, they want to know about you, not, some people, think that marriage and family defines them, but they want to know about you and why, how it defines you pertaining to that job.
Yes.
You have to,
Yeah.
what you have to
Because
offer.
They ask you,
What type
tell
of
me about yourself,
qualifications?
What you have to
well, I'm
offer.
qualified on this,
Mhm.
qualified in this, and I've taken this course and I've taken that course, and it has to relate to that job.
Yep.